Good morning, everyone. Oh, thank you. Still very low, but I think he had a wonderful insight and wonderful energy, and the way he delivered, I think that touched everyone. And we all know about Dabbawalas for sure, but inside what he shared, I'm sure that most of us were not aware of. So let's try to shift the gear towards more of a slightly what I say that academic driven. That was more practical, and he said that doesn't understand Six Sigma and all that, but the way they basically serve the customer, all the award automatically get attracted to them. That's how basically the beauty in serving the customer. But when we look at overall perspective, when we look at the supply chain, when we look at the way supply chain or integrated or efficient supply chain helps economy to drive some value, that's how you see some difference in that. What we looked at the productivity of countries, how the efficient and integrated supply chain impact the productivity of the country. What we found 85% of correlation coefficient between both of them. If you have really good integrated system, you have really good integrated or efficient logistic system in the country, you have a very good productivity in terms of what we call the real GDP per capita, real GDP per labor. That's up. I mean, given some of the volatility in some of the years, you can see some deviation, but more or less it's 85% correlated. That itself is a huge learning for all of us, that when we have a good efficient supply chain, that's going to impact your productivity, is going to impact your revenue, and of course manage your cost structure. Now, when we shift the gear towards what we call the real scenario, what we have seen since last, almost 8 years or 9 years, what we have seen starting from 2017. If you look at the supply chain pressure index, fortunately prior to pandemic, everything was good, everything was very normal. You can see it's trending close to zero. It was good. In fact, there was no pressure at all on the supply chain. But the first hit, the first volatile moment we got during pandemic, you can see the COVID-19, the shot up significantly, which means everything got disrupted. Everything on the planet got disturbed. No single country, no single individual, or no single human life or company, was isolated from this COVID-19 impact. So everyone got impacted. Look at the pressure index. But the things improved, came down, okay, fine. Then all of a sudden, some month later down the line, we have Suez Canal blockage. That was equally bad. Why we all felt that the pandemic was very bad from the supply chain disruption, but Suez Canal was equally bad. Most of might have not realized because of the network density. Because most of the company relied on the single supplier, single partner, single countries, and that basically impacted us. And then we had what you call the shipping cost that pushed to the further. Then things started coming down. We had the Russia-Ukraine crisis. We had a strike in the what you call South Korea, and then Panama Canal disruption. Everything was basically somehow not as bad as what we had seen the Suez Canal COVID-19. But unfortunately, while we thought that things will now improve, your tariff is another impact creating a supply chain. But unfortunately, in fact, fortunately, that whatever we thought that tariff is going to impact much, it didn't. Look at this. But tariff was high for many countries. In fact, all of the countries got impacted because of the tariff. The supply chain network continued to float, continued to go up because the pressure index was not very high. So that's the reality of the world, which means we need to navigate ourselves to ensure that we are not feeling the pressure from the supply chain disruption. That's not the reality of the new world, reality of the new normal. Now, moving on, when we look at some of the facts, how this is going to impact, how we feel impacted because of the supply chain disruption, supply chain pressure. If you look at 90% of the organization lack awareness of even their sub-tier supplier. They don't know tier one supplier, possibly they know, okay, fine, whatever things they are doing, they are aware of. But their tier one, tier two supplier, absolutely some of us, 90% of the company say they don't know. And in fact, they don't know the next 40 hours or next 24 hours, how many of them will go bankrupt, how many of them will basically go disrupted in any of those disruption event. So it's good that we should know entire network chain, not just your tier one supplier. Because the cost of not knowing or cost of basically the disruption is roughly around $50 million average company. So in every average company basically lose $50 million every year because of every supply chain disruption what we face. And we have seen that, what pressure I'm talking about. But when we have good sound risk management system in place, when we know the entire supplier network, when we basically invest in the technology pertaining to supply chain, we are able to manage 37 million in terms of the saving every year per company, basically. That's how the benefit of being advanced, that's how the benefit of being ahead of the curve. Now moving on, what we looked at the 16 million events, 16 million, what we call the network across 80 countries and roughly around 40 industries. The metrics was 4,000 into 4,000 metrics, basically what we looked at. 16 million density, what we have looked at. What we found that the more any country are dependent on that high dense network, more they feel vulnerable in terms of any of the economic shock or any of the supply chain shocks. For example, we know, TSMC in the Taiwan, in the chip, how we are basically concentrated, how we are basically dependent on that company. Foxconn in the electronic, and we have a Maersk in the shipping line. It's just so dense that any event, and they feel impacted, they in fact create impact and the ripple impact on not just country, even the companies. So more and more, any of the countries are following those high density network, more they feel. In fact, look at the chart. During the global financial crisis, what we found that the countries or the companies who are dependent on very few suppliers, their GDP declined by 2.1% vis-a-vis the countries or the companies where they're basically not dependent on just few, which means they had a fragmented, very low density, their GDP declined by just 0.1%. But when I look at the data during COVID-19, these are even more severe, right? So if any of the countries or the company follow very high dense network, which means they are relying on very few countries, few companies for your supplier, you feel disrupted, because if they are feeling impacted, they will create a ripple effect, not just on you, your supplier, your customer, and you feel more disturbed. So is a concentration how we need to basically play a safe role, that diversify your portfolio. Don't be a, just one company or two company supplier, maybe expand your network, have a balance, because even if you diversify more, possibly there's risk of failure is very high in that sense. Now, looking at, I just spoke about tier one and tier two network. We all know about our tier one supplier, but possibly we don't know about the ultimate beneficiary, ultimate ownership of that company at a tier two, tier three level. Sometimes it creates a circular because both company own some of the share in each other, and that's how basically restrict your control on those companies. The looping mechanism, looping ownership is very dangerous. We need to know about who are basically owning in order to have full control or full awareness about the supply network. It may happen, it's not just your country A or country B, we have a tier one supplier, possibly given the ownership. It's beyond jurisdiction, beyond legal boundaries, beyond compliance network. We need to know about the entire tier one, tier two, tier three, and the tier four network, and the looping ownership as well. Because when we are aware about ultimate beneficiary owner, we are in full control of that which company will create a trouble for which company. It may happen your tier one supplier is very good, but tier two supplier have ownership of multiple company which is in the compliance or maybe regulatory hurdles, possibly tier one will feel disrupted and you will eventually feel disrupted. Now, moving on quickly, last month we did survey of 10,000 companies globally across 32 countries, including India, across 17 sectors. And we asked certain set of questions. Maybe some of you might have also replied to that answer. And asked that, okay, when you talk about the geopolitical concern, when we talk about weather-related, climate-related disruption, what basically, how disrupted you feel. It's surprising if you look, almost 50% of the 50% of the company said, okay, we felt disrupted, but that was a minor. But 17%, roughly 20% we can see, they felt major disruption because of the climate related. So 65% of the company, they felt either the minor or disrupted during any of the weather or climate related disruption for the supply chain network. Just 8%, they felt nothing, but that's unusual. Possibly they are not exposed to the supply chain network. Said, okay, you felt disrupted or you didn't feel disrupted. What did you do to manage your network, to manage your strategies? Roughly you see all the companies who felt disrupted, 49% of them said the scenario planning and risk modeling, 47% of said the diversifying supplier base away from their climate vulnerable regions, and of course 33% investing in climate resilient infrastructure. And just 8% companies said that no action. Possibly those 8% company didn't feel anything. So that's the impact coming from what we found from all of you as a real data coming in, and it's coming directly from the companies and what they failed. Now, moving on to the final things, I think all of you are working in an era where all of us feel impacted because of multiple things. We have a, disparate system in terms of, and we have our people working at the various location. It's a geographical, differences, and then it's not in a single team. And of course, huge set of data. What we do because of this, we often get a lot of in the trouble in terms of supply chain and supply chain efficiency. What we need to basically work together to manage greater transparencies, not just to understand where your truck into the basically the platform or real-time analysis, also use those data for good insight, good data, a good, the way forward. Those are the things basically required for all of us to manage how we look the future. But I think supply chain, the disruption, what we have seen is actually going to stay here. Supply chain pressure index is no exception, is going to be new normal. When we talk to the global companies, when we talk to various associations, they felt disrupted, and I think they're saying this is new normal. We are going to stay within the boundary. With that, I will close. Thank you for listening and thank you for joining this morning. I know in Mumbai, traveling in the morning is not that easy. So thanks for making up to this event, and we are looking forward for a really wonderful, insightful day today. Thank you.